maybe this is the moment to say that one of the other reasons that this article struck me is that many years ago, I had thought about this process actually triggered by something in the New York Times. And I had been moved enough and frustrated enough to actually go through the process of writing a letter to the Times and getting it published. And anyway, I think you'll be interested to see that letter. It's very short, so maybe we should bring it up.
This was in 2003.
This was in 2003. It says, to the editor regarding a lyrical gift by Maureen Dowd. And I should say Maureen Dowd's column was essentially a report of a case in which somebody's life had been saved by organ donation and what a marvelous thing it had been, and the connection to the people who had allowed their loved one's organ to be donated, and a plea to make yourself an organ donor. Don't be selfish, right? Yeah. And this frustrated me because I realized that when I first became a driver, of course, you get your driver's license and they say, do you want to be an organ donor? And the answer was, of course, why wouldn't I? And years later, I had stopped being an organ donor. And so I had been through the thought process a little bit of why that was. I hadn't become more selfish, but I had become wiser about the brokenness of systems. And so in any case, here I'll continue to read the letter. Most of us would like nothing better than for our organs to save other people when we die, yet many elect not to register as donors. Why? Because doctors are human, and in allocating scarce time and resources, it would be remarkable if they were never affected by the knowledge that a particular death might save 5 or more other lives. Organ donors get little benefit for facing that uncertainty, and though the risk is presumably small, the negative consequences for an unlucky donor is potentially profound. But the trickle of organs could easily be turned to a flood. Eliminate the danger of conflicted medical interests by moving donor status out of one's wallet and into a controlled access database. Then give priority to individuals seeking to receive an organ based on their history as registered donors. It would surely be an effective incentive, and what could be more fair? It's signed Brett Weinstein, and then it says that the writer is a professor of biology at the Evergreen State College. So that was back in 2003, more than 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Now,
so let me just say I remember the letter, of course. The one part of it that at first I didn't understand is removing the status out of one's wallet into a controlled access database. You're not talking about any kind of financial anything there. You're just talking about actually having your donor status on your driver's license or in a separate card that you carry around, as opposed to it being out of view from both you and any medical professional who would like to check.
I don't want the EMT or the doctors to have any idea that I'm an organ donor until after they've decided there's no hope, at which point I'm fine with it.
Yep.
I'm fine with it if they've done that job well, but I don't want them perversely incentivized, because is it even conceivable that a doctor faced with a patient that they can't save and they feel is very likely to die might give up sooner if they thought, well, some good will come of this, and the sooner the better, right? Of course it's going to create this problem. And, I saw it more than 20 years ago. What's more, what frustrated me about that letter, I did get some correspondence back from it, from some private organizations that had created private schemes to do exactly what I was talking about. Didn't know they existed. But the idea was you join some organization, and then you're being willing to donate your organs to others in the organization gives you priority on their organs. It makes perfect sense. So you've got federal pressure.
But there's the success of such a scheme is going to be density dependent. It's going to be more successful the more people are part of it. So if you have 40 different schemes in the country, it's going to be much less effective than if you had all of those people in one.
Right. So what we've got now, according to the New York Times, is federal pressure to get more organs, resulting in living people being butchered by doctors while in a potentially recoverable state, in a state in which they can potentially feel it and maybe even understand something, right? When there's another way to do this that creates a huge likely increase in the availability of organs, because the point is, if you know, do you want to be an organ donor? Well, that answer is very different if you know that you might need an organ someday and you want access to it, and the way you get access is to become an organ donor, and you can put aside your fears because your doctor and your EMT aren't going to know that you're an organ donor until it's too late to do anything for you. So my overarching sense reading this New York Times article is good governance is difficult, but it is not nearly as hard as they are making it look. That every one of these damn things is the result of conflicts of interest, taking obvious solutions like the one that I sent to the New York Times 20 years ago. And frankly,
and which apparently people had actually already seen and acted on.
Right. They had already built their private systems. But of course, a private system is no way to do that for the reason that you point out. You want as many people in the system as possible. So anyway, I find the whole thing maddening. Do we want solutions? Here's a good one. What's the argument against it? Right? Does it hurt anything? I can't see that it does. Does it potentially save people from being butchered by doctors in their last moments or being robbed of life they would otherwise have lived? It would save a lot of them. Right? I still want much better safeguards than the ones we apparently have. But if I could see it 20 years ago, and I could say it in the New York Times, and it wasn't like, hey, that's a pretty good idea. Let's see if we can make that happen. It's like, it's nothing. It just so
well, and it's an unfortunately common trajectory, right? There was, and I don't remember the Maureen Dowd piece, but as you described it, it was, heartfelt, tear-jerking, look at the success and value of transplants now that we have the technology and know how to do transplants, and presented as a story without trade-offs at some level, right? Very, very Pollyanna, very like, how could anyone choose not to be potentially contributing to such a story if you end up unfortunately dying unexpectedly? How could you not? And I suspect, I remember this moment. I was pregnant at the time, so I probably don't remember it that well. But I suspect that you read it as that's great, but you need the New York Times needs to recognize that there are incentives here that aren't being described, and that you're going to send people down a road that will be dangerous. And here we are in the New York Times 22 years later with an article that exactly reveals the tension and the cruelty that is going to be inherent in a system without requiring that anyone individually actually be acting cruelly.
Right.
I'm not saying that some people aren't, but this doesn't require that any people be monsters or evil or any of that. It doesn't require that at all.
It does not require that at all. And I agree with you. I think there will be some monsters in this system, but they don't need to be there. Right. The incentives alone are enough to do it.